Insurance professionals work hard every day to keep people safe, but as technology transforms the industry, how can insurers protect not only their clients, but also shield themselves from ever-changing cyber risks? My name is Elizabeth Blossfield, and I'm the host of the Insuring Cyber Podcast, a monthly look into how the world of cyber and the business of insurance are connected. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Insuring Cyber Podcast. We hear a lot from agents and carriers on this podcast about how cyber risk is affecting their clients' business. But today we're turning the tables and hearing from Alvito Vaz, Executive Director of ID Federation, about the impact on agents and carriers themselves. We talked about how his company seeks to provide standardized tools to implement better cybersecurity measures like multi-factor authentication into an agency's business. Check out what he had to say. Hi, Alvito. It's great to be speaking with you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on the podcast today, Elizabeth.
Before we get into some of the questions about agencies and the use of MFA and cybersecurity requirements, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about ID Federation and how it's sort of helping agencies meet these requirements.
Absolutely. So ID Federation was actually formed about 10 years ago. It's hard to believe that. And the whole impetus behind it was a couple of people within the industry got together and said, hey, it's really hard managing all these different IDs, passwords, etc. And one of the two entities I was talking about, it was a large bank, so they literally dealt with dozens of different carriers. So they decided to try a workaround and see if we can use some of the security standards to make that easier. And the outcome of that was ID Federation. So on average, an independent mid-sized agency probably has 10 employees, does business with 15 carriers. That means that average agency is managing 150 different credentials. And each of those carriers has different requirements around how long is my password, what's it composed of, when does it expire, and what MFA am I using. So this adds a lot of complexity and makes it very difficult for the agency to manage these various identities.
Yeah, I can imagine it's a lot to think about and a lot of different things to take into consideration as you're navigating this. And I know that ID Federation is a coalition, as you mentioned, of carriers, agents, brokers, and industry organizations. Why was that collaborative approach so important to developing these solutions?
Yeah, so I think the independent agent channel is very unique. It offers more choice than any of the other insurance models. And this is certainly a huge advantage in the independent agent channel. For consumers, it gives them the choice in both the type of coverage and the price points available that neither the captive or the direct channels have. However, the disadvantage is the added expense component of an agent having to deal with 10, 15, 20 different carriers. One of the things that has been successful in the past is the establishment of standards. And we really see this in the download process today. So Accord set up the Accord download standards, and we have hundreds of carriers using that same standard to push information from their systems down to the management system. And I think the same thing can be said about security standards. This is an area where having a standard makes it easier for all participants. It makes it easier for the agency, makes it easier for the carrier, and it makes it easier for the tech provider. And as I talk to carriers, no one has said, hey, we have an advantage because we have a better security system. It's actually a disadvantage to everyone in the channel to have multiple different disparate security systems. So working with agents, carriers, and providers, we can actually both improve security and operational effectiveness. And that's the value that ID Federation is bringing to the table.
Yeah, and I can imagine it's an incredible value with those standards, especially because, the world of cybersecurity changes so quickly and it can be tough to keep up. So I'm curious how you're seeing cyber insurance requirements kind of changing right now, and what should agencies expect when they're shopping for coverage?
They certainly are changing, and probably changing faster than anything else in the insurance space. There's increased business exposure, greater awareness from consumers. And consumers, as their awareness builds, are also going to the government and saying, hey, you need to protect us against this cyber exposure. Kind of leading the charge on the government side is the New York Department of Financial Services. They started, probably close to 15-ish years ago and came out with a set of standards. In that iteration, they've continued to evolve them over time. And the most recent set of standards requires the largest entities, they're called Class A companies, to use MFA for all their connections. And the Department of Financial Services also clarified their expectation. Not only do the entities need to use it, but any of the service providers they use, say a comparative rater or an agency management system, also have to comply with those MFA standards. And the person that's responsible is the licensed entity. So it would be the agency or the carrier, which are licensed by the DFS. They have to make sure that compliance occurs. So far, the DFS has collected over $19 million in fines from auto insurance companies over breaches. So certainly both carriers and agents are very aware of this and understand how this is impacting their day-to-day life.
Yeah, and this is so important because we hear so much about MFA, and I'm curious if an agency doesn't meet those MFA requirements that you just talked about, what could happen if they experience, a cyber incident and need to file a claim?
Unfortunately, most small businesses are underprotected with cyber claims. A recent study I read said only 17% of small businesses even have cyber insurance, though they are 43% of all cyber attacks. So even though they're being targeted, most of them don't have that. And as far as solvency of the company, this is probably one of the largest risks. An IBM study reported that the average small business breach cost is over $3 million. So if you have a breach, you have a huge exposure. Now, specifically around coverage, which was the question you asked, I'm going to give you an example of an insurance agent that talked to me about this. So there's an agency in Northeast in the New England area, and they told me they have a $1 million cyber policy. But when he started reading through the fine print on that policy, he found that without MFA, if a breach occurred and there was no MFA present, that $1 million policy is reduced to a $100,000 policy. So this is a great example of where fine print means a lot. And more carriers, government entities, and insurance providers are asking for MFA. I spoke to another agency, and they said in their cyber policy, if they didn't use MFA, they would not be covered. So huge risk if you don't use it.
Yeah, a huge risk and lots of challenge to navigate if a cyber incident does occur, which, as you said, almost 43% of small businesses, these are occurring. So, and I know you mentioned also the state regulation requirements, especially New York and South Carolina. Do you expect to see more states following suit as well and requiring this?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with South Carolina. I have been closely monitoring New York, and actually I've had several conversations with them about how ID Federation can assist in what they're trying to do. So New York has been the leader here. And in addition to being the leader, they're influencing the NAIC in what the NAIC is doing around their cyber policies and data models. So in 2017, the NAIC came out with a data security model law that used the New York DFS framework to set a national standard. As of August 2025, this NAIC model has been adopted by 28 states. So clearly, New York is influencing NAIC. NAIC is then being implemented across the country. My guess, and this is only a guess, is the most recent changes in New York's law, which occurred in November of last year, will at some point also get into the NAIC model law. But I assume that'll take probably several years to get there, but I do expect it to get there.
Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting to keep an eye on this space and see how things evolve. And I know we talk a lot about MFA on this podcast. It's so important. And one of the biggest challenges that I hear is just on the operational side that can be kind of a headache and frustrating to, sort of get everything up to speed. So what would you say to, agents who are struggling with these challenges for how to sort of navigate that?
Certainly is a challenge. Before MFA became prevalent, agents had other tools. So they could use password managers and store their ID and password. So you didn't have to remember the 15 different passwords to connect into a carrier. With ID Federation, we allow you to use a federated identity model, which is something that's been used in the technology space for decades to bypass managing multiple IDs and passwords. You're basically using your sign into your agency management system, so a single ID, single password, single MFA, to then generate a token which is sent to carrier partners, avoiding having to sign in a second time. So it's a huge savings, and the challenge around this has been who goes first. So is it the agent that demands it, or is it the carrier that provides it? So agents are waiting for enough carriers to support ID Federation, so they have a standardized workflow, and carriers are waiting for sufficient demand from agents to implement sign-on-one. So they're both looking at each other, saying who's going to go first. And we really need the leaders to step forward and say, we don't compete on security. This is how we're going to make it better for the independent agent channel. And we do have some partners that have done that. At some point, we're going to reach a tipping point when we have probably 5 to 6 national carriers doing sign-on-ones through ID Federation. Agents are going to ask their remaining carriers to support that effort.
Yeah, well, it's great work that you're doing in this space because, as you mentioned, that is, a difficult challenge to navigate. And I can imagine that there's a lot of value in the solutions that you're providing. And it's great to sort of check in and talk about this. I know, as we mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, things change so quickly in this space. So it's always good to get an update about, what's going on and what kind of solutions are out there. Was there anything else that I didn't ask or anything that you wanted to add for listeners?
One of the benefits of having a standardized process like ID Federation and sign-on-ones is as security exposure changes, we're upgrading the underlying trust framework. A great example of that was when the trust framework was first developed about 10 years ago. The concept of MFA was very non-existent. Yes, it existed, but no one was really forcing people to use it. So 3 years ago, we updated the trust framework to now have 3 attributes specific to MFA. So when you're signing in through sign-on-ones, the carriers know what type of MFA you're using, who's the vendor of the MFA product, and the NIST security level. So we're sending you information of how that sign-on is, and then the carrier can respond to that. Another example of something we're looking at right now, it just came up this year, is we're seeing more AI coming in with agentic systems. And we're starting to look at how do agentic agents fit into the ID Federation framework. So it's an evolving standard.
Yeah, it's exciting, like I said, to see what's ahead. And that's something we didn't get to touch on is the use of AI and how that's helping evolve this space as well. So it's interesting to hear about that. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And thanks for taking the time to join the podcast today.
You're welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you.
That's all for this episode. Thanks to Alvito for joining me and all of you for tuning in. You can check out all of the previous episodes of the Insuring Cyber Podcast at insurancejournal.tv or wherever you get your podcasts. And feel free to reach out to me at eblossfield@wellsmedia.com with any comments or questions. Talk to you next time.